Hey guys, welcome back to more r/MaliciousCompliance Reddit stories. In today's Ripe Stories video, my power-tripping boss gave me a brutal ultimatum. Keep the overheating machines running or get fired on the spot. I knew it would cause a disaster, but he would not listen, so I maliciously complied with his demands. Let's dive right into the video. And the first one is titled r/MaliciousCompliance. Toxic boss ordered me to never shut down the machines, so I maliciously complied. So I have been working in the manufacturing industry for a long time already. I'm the kind of person who likes to come in, do my job correctly, make sure my team is safe and go home to my wife. For years, I worked at a facility that produced specialized plastic components. We made parts for everything, from household appliances to medical devices. It was a good job and the pay was decent and the hours were steady, and the people on the floor were hard workers who looked out for each other. Our facility operated a bank of large industrial injection molding machines. If you've never been inside such a plant, I can tell you it is loud, hot, and smells faintly of melted resin. The machines are massive pieces of equipment. They take raw plastic pellets, heat them to incredibly high temperatures until they turn into a thick liquid, and then inject that liquid under immense pressure into steel molds. Once the plastic cools, the mold opens, the part drops out, and the cycle starts all over again. Running these machines is not just a matter of pressing a green button and then walking away though. It requires constant supervision, adjustment and maintenance because plastic is a very temperamental material. If it gets too hot, it burns and turns brittle. If it gets too cold, it will not fill the mold properly. Because of the extreme heat and pressure, the machinery builds up a lot of residue. Burned carbon, degraded plastic and old color dyes stick to the inside of the heating barrels and the intricate channels of the molds. To keep the parts coming out perfect, we had a strict maintenance schedule. Every single machine had to be shut down for about 30 minutes midway through the shift. During this downtime, my team and I would run a special cleaning compound through the system. We called this purging. It cleared out all the degraded junk. Then we would wipe down the mold faces, check the cooling lines and start the machine back up. This was like standard operating procedure. It was the only way to guarantee that the parts met the strict quality standards our clients demanded. For the first 5 years I worked there, things ran smoothly. Our plant manager was an older guy who had worked his way up from the factory floor, and he understood the machinery. He knew that taking 30 minutes of downtime to clean the equipment saved us from making thousands of defective parts. He trusted me and the other shift supervisors to manage the floor, and in return we gave him excellent production numbers with very little scrap. But then he retired. His replacement was a complete nightmare. I would just call him the boss. The boss was a younger guy, fresh out of some business program, and he had absolutely zero experience in a manufacturing environment. He had never operated a machine, he had never handled raw materials, and he certainly had never dealt with the realities of industrial production. He wanted to make a name for himself by breaking production records, and he was convinced that the previous manager was just old and lazy. From his very first week, the boss made it clear that he thought we were all slacking off. He would walk the floor in his expensive clothes, looking at the machines and checking his watch. He hated seeing a machine sitting idle. To him, an idle machine was losing money, and he didn't care about the reasons. He only saw a negative metric on his precious reports. The trouble started when we got a massive contract from a new client. This client needed a very specific high-stress plastic component for a power tool assembly. The order was huge, the deadline was incredibly tight, and the quality requirements were the strictest I'd ever seen. The plastic resin we had to use for this specific part was notoriously difficult to work with. It was prone to thermal degradation. If it sat in the heating barrel for even a few minutes too long, or if the mold was not perfectly clean, the parts would come out brittle. They might look fine to the naked eye, but the internal structure would be compromised and they would snap under pressure. I held a meeting with my shift team before we started the run. I explained the requirements and told everyone that we needed to be extra careful. I told them to stick strictly to the purging schedule, and we would shut down every 4 hours, clean everything out and start fresh. It was the only way to ensure the parts would pass the stress tests, and we started the run on a Monday morning, and things were going well for the first few hours. The parts were coming out perfectly, quality control was testing them, and everything was passing with flying colors. Around lunchtime, it was time for the first scheduled purge, and I gave the signal, and my operators began shutting down their machines. The factory floor got a little quieter as the heavy thumping of the presses stopped, and within 2 minutes the boss came storming out of his office. He marched straight over to my station, his face red with anger. He asked me what was going on and why the machines were stopped. I calmly explained to him that we were doing the scheduled mid-shift purge. I told him about the sensitive nature of the resin we were using and how crucial it was to clean the barrels so the plastic would not degrade. The boss completely ignored my explanation. He loudly declared that we were wasting time with this, and he pointed out that we had a massive quota to meet for this new client and that we were already behind schedule according to his projections, and he told me that every minute a machine was off, the company was bleeding money. I tried to reason with him. I explained that if we did not clean the machines, the parts would become brittle and fail the client's stress tests. I told him that producing bad parts would cost us a lot more than a 30-minute cleaning break, but he stepped close to me and raised his voice so the other operators could hear. He told me that he was the plant manager and I was just a floor supervisor. He said my job was to keep the machines running and not to make excuses. He explicitly ordered me to turn the machines back on immediately and to cancel all future cleaning breaks for the duration of this contract. I stood my ground and told him that running this specific material non-stop would ruin the entire batch. I warned him that the scrap rate would be astronomical, but the boss looked at me and delivered the ultimatum. He said I was to never shut down the machines. He told me that if I stopped the production line for any reason other than a catastrophic mechanical failure, I would be fired on the spot. He said he wanted 100% uptime and he expected to see the output numbers reflect that. I took a deep breath. I knew exactly what was going to happen here, but I also knew that arguing with this guy was kind of pointless. I mean, he had made his decision and he had threatened my livelihood. So I decided right then and there that I was going to follow his instructions to the absolute letter. I looked him in the eye and said, okay. I told him I would comply with his orders, but I also knew I needed to protect myself, and I told him that since he was completely overriding standard operating procedure and the manufacturer guidelines for the resin, I needed his order in writing. I said I would not turn the machines back on until I had an email from him explicitly stating that I was forbidden from shutting down for routine cleaning. He sneered at me, muttered something about my incompetence, and stomped back to his office. 5 minutes later, my phone buzzed. It was an email from the boss, and the email was perfect. It was sent to me with a copy to the quality control lead. It stated in very clear terms that the shift supervisor was strictly forbidden from halting production for routine purging, cleaning, or maintenance during this specific client run, and it explicitly commanded that the machines must run continuously throughout the shift to maximize output. It ended with a direct warning that any unauthorized downtime would result in immediate termination of employment. I forwarded the email to my personal mail address just to be safe. Then I printed out a hard copy, folded it up, and put it in my pocket. I walked over to the main control panel and hit the start alarms, and the machines fired back up. The operators looked at me with confusion, knowing we had not finished the cleaning process, but I walked down the line and told everyone the new plan. I told them the boss had ordered continuous operation and we were not gonna stop. I told them to just keep the hoppers full of raw material and let the machines do their thing. The rest of that shift was agonizing to watch. For the first hour or two, the parts still looked okay, but by the middle of the afternoon, the signs of degradation were becoming obvious. The plastic coming out of the molds started to look slightly discolored. It had a dull finish instead of the glossy look it was supposed to have, and you could see tiny dark streaks in the plastic where the burnt residue from the heating barrel was mixing into the fresh material. The quality control lead came over to my station. He was a meticulous guy who took his job very seriously, and he was holding a handful of the power tool components. He dropped them on my desk and told me that we had a serious problem. He explained that the parts were failing the drop tests and the stress tests, and they were snapping right down the middle with minimal force, and he said the whole batch was garbage and we needed to stop production immediately to diagnose the issue. And by the way, guys, if you would have been in this situation and everything had gone to hell just because you followed the orders of your awful boss, how would you have reacted? Would you have done the same SOP? Let me know in the comments, and if you still enjoyed the malicious compliance stories, then please don't forget to like the video and maybe even post a comment if you want to support me. Thank you so much. I pulled out the printed email out of my pocket and handed it to him. I told him there was no issue to diagnose. I explained that we were running dirty machines because the boss had threatened to fire me if I stopped to clean them. The quality control lead read the email and he shook his head in disbelief. He asked me what we were supposed to do, and I told him we were gonna do exactly what we were told. We were gonna maximize output. I told him to continue doing his testing, document every single failure, and log the scrap rate accurately in his system, and then box up the parts just like normal. I told him not to intervene, not to argue with the boss, and to just let the disaster unfold exactly as the boss had commanded. He agreed, he took the email, made a copy for his own records, and went back to his testing station, and for the next 4 days we ran those machines without stopping. We ran them through my shift, we ran them through the night shift, and we ran them through the weekend. The noise in the factory was constant, the smell of burning plastic grew stronger every day, and the residue built-up in the machines was so bad that the molds were struggling to close properly, but we kept pushing through. We produced thousands upon thousands of these components, and by the third day, almost every single part coming off the line was visibly defective. They were actually streaked with black carbon, warped from uneven cooling, and brittle as glass, and we packed them all into massive cardboard shipping boxes, taped them up, and put them on the pallets. The boss was absolutely ecstatic. He spent the entire week walking around with a massive grin on his face, and he would check the computerized production logs and see that the machines had zero downtime. He saw the sheer volume of parts we were churning out and praised himself for fixing the inefficiencies of the previous management. He even sent out the company-wide email congratulating his own leadership and boasting about how we were gonna crush the client's deadline. He never once looked inside the shipping boxes, and he never once spoke to the quality control lead. He just looked at the raw numbers on his screen and assumed that he was a genius. At the end of the week, the contract run was complete. We had processed thousands of pounds of expensive specialized resin, and we had loaded dozens of pallets onto delivery trucks, and they were shipped out to the client's assembly plant. The floor crew and I spent the entire next day taking the machines apart to clean them, and the damage from running them continuously was severe. The heating barrels were coated in a thick, rock-hard layer of charred plastic. We had to use heavy tools and specialized solvents to chip it all out. It took 3 times as long to clean the machines now as it normally would have, but we got them back into working order. Then we waited. It took exactly 3 days for the explosion to happen. I was in the middle of my morning shift when the boss came sprinting out of his office. He looked like he was gonna be sick or something. His face was super pale and he was sweating. He yelled my name across the floor and told me to get into the conference room immediately. When I walked into the conference room, I saw the boss pacing back and forth. The quality control lead was already sitting at the table, looking perfectly calm. On the speakerphone in the center of the table, I could hear the voice of our company's regional director. He was the guy who oversaw all the plants in our division, and he sounded absolutely furious. The boss slammed the door shut and pointed a shaking hand at me. He yelled into the phone that I was the one responsible, and he told the regional director that I'd completely botched the entire production run, and the regional director told the boss to shut up. He then addressed me directly, and he explained that the client had received our shipment and immediately put the parts onto their assembly line, and when they tried to install the components into their power tools, every single part shattered. The client halted their entire assembly process and conducted a full inspection of our shipment. They found that almost 100% of the parts we sent them were structurally compromised due to severe thermal degradation. The regional director explained the financial impact, and the client had rejected the entire shipment. They were demanding a full refund for the defective parts. On top of that, they were invoking a penalty clause in the contract for delaying their own manufacturing schedule. When you added up the cost of the wasted high-end resin, the shipping costs, the labor hours, the contract penalties, the total loss for our company was sitting right around $300,000. Furthermore, the client was threatening to cancel all future contracts with us. It was just an unmitigated disaster, and the regional director demanded to know how this could have happened. He asked how thousands of defective parts made it past our floor supervisors and our quality control department, and before I could even open my mouth, the boss started screaming. He accused me of gross negligence, and he said I was a lazy supervisor who didn't know how to run a machine. He claimed that I must have fallen asleep on the job or intentionally sabotaged the run because I didn't like his management style. He demanded that the regional director fire me immediately and dock my pay to cover the damages, and I let him rant for a solid 2 minutes. I just stood there listening to him dig his own grave. The quality control lead sat quietly watching the show, and when the boss finally ran out of breath, the room was silent. The regional director asked me if I had anything to say in my defense, and I spoke calmly and clearly into the speakerphone. I told the regional director that I took my job very seriously and that I had always followed standard operating procedures, and I explained that the specific resin required for this part needed a mandatory purge and cleaning cycle every 4 hours to prevent the exact thermal degradation the client had experienced. I then explained that on the first day of the run, I had attempted to perform this standard cleaning cycle. And I told the regional director that the boss had come onto the floor, stopped the cleaning process, and explicitly commanded me to run the machines continuously for the entire week. The boss interrupted me, yelling that I was a liar, and he told the regional director that I was making things up to save my own skin and that he would never authorize something so stupid. So I reached into my pocket and pulled out the folded piece of paper. I unfolded it, smoothed it out on the table, and slid it towards the center of the room. I told the regional director that I knew running the machines without cleaning them would ruin the parts, and I explained that I'd warned the boss about the scrap rate and the quality issues, and I told the regional director that the boss had threatened to fire me on the spot if I shut the machines down for any reason, and I was not willing to lose my job. I said on through the phone. So I asked the plant manager to put his orders in writing. I have a printed copy of his email sitting right here on the table. The quality control lead was copied on it as well, and he has the digital original in his inbox. The color completely drained from my boss's face. He stared at the piece of paper on the table as if it were a bomb, and the quality control lead spoke up for the first time, and he confirmed my story completely. He told the regional director that I had brought the mail to him on the first day, and he explained that he had continuously tested the parts, documented the 100% failure rate in the system, and alerted the plant manager's automated dashboard. He stated clearly that the boss had simply ignored all the quality alerts and pushed for maximum output regardless of the defects. The speakerphone was silent for a long, heavy moment. The only sound in the room was the boss taking shallow, panicked breaths, and finally the regional director spoke. His voice was dangerously quiet, and he asked the boss if he had sent that email. The boss tried to stutter out an excuse, and he talked about production metrics, efficiency goals, and how he thought the cleaning cycle was just an old habit that slowed down progress. He tried to claim that he didn't know the plastic would degrade that badly, and the regional director cut him off. He simply stated the facts, and he told the boss that he had ignored the technical expertise of his floor staff, overridden basic manufacturing principles, and single-handedly cost the company $300,000, not to mention a major client relationship. The regional director then told me and the quality control lead to leave the conference room and return to the factory floor. He said he needed to have a private conversation with the plant manager, and we walked out of the room and closed the door behind us. We stood in the hallway for a few minutes listening to the muffled sounds coming from inside. We couldn't hear exactly what was being said, but the tone of the regional director's voice was sharp enough to cut glass. About 20 minutes later, the conference room door opened and the boss walked out. He didn't look at us, he didn't even say a word. He walked straight to his office, grabbed a small cardboard box, and started packing up his personal belongings. A few minutes after that, 2 guys from the building security team arrived. They stood by the door of his office, watched him finish packing, and then escorted him out of the building. He was fired on the spot. Later that afternoon, the regional director drove down to our facility in person, and he held a meeting with me, the quality control lead, and the rest of the shift supervisors. He apologized to us for the situation, and he admitted that the company had made a mistake in hiring someone with no manufacturing background to run a production facility, and he assured me that my job was perfectly safe. The cleanup process took weeks, though. We had to negotiate extensively with the client to keep their business, and we agreed to rerun the entire order at cost, and we had to pay expedited shipping fees to get the new parts to them as fast as possible. The company absorbed the entire $300,000 loss, and things on the floor went back to normal very quickly. The regional director stepped in to act as the interim plant manager while they searched for a permanent replacement. He immediately reinstated our standard operating procedures as well. We went back to shutting down the machines every 4 hours for purging and cleaning. The new batch of parts for the client was produced under strict quality guidelines, and every single piece passed the stress tests perfectly. And yeah guys, it seems that the boss in this story really thought he discovered something like a PS2 secret cheat code for infinite manufacturing. Just don't clean the machines. I mean, why didn't the engineers think of that over the last 50 years? Truly a visionary mind of our generation. And a user in the comments said, "There's nothing quite like the confidence of a 24-year-old with a brand new business degree and a watch he cannot even afford, explaining to a guy with 20 years of experience how plastic works." Another Reddit comment said, "This is one of those stories where the phrase production numbers does a lot of the heavy lifting. I've worked in a warehouse where management would obsess over how many units moved per hour, and then they acted shocked when half the orders had mistakes because everyone was rushing the work. Metrics are useful until some guy who never touched the equipment starts treating them like the only thing that exists." And the next one is another fantastic malicious compliance story that you don't want to miss. It is titled, "I was a manager at a pub/restaurant and a lady tried to make me fire the owner." So I worked at a pub/restaurant and I'm a manager for the night shift. Our policy is that the managers should be trained in all roles of the pub so they can help out everyone. Even the owner helps jobs just for the heck of it. This is important later. When I started working, I was the jack of all trades of the pub. I started out as a host and buzzer and later got trained in bartending and server work. If there was an employee who needed help, I was the go-to guy. This helped me to become a manager later in life. One night we were very packed and I was working host. One of the younger buzzers needed help and was falling behind in his job. I asked the owner to cover me at the host desk while I cleared the floodgate of backed up dishes. Sweet lord, there were like 5 tubs of dishes, and my best friend the dishwasher was pissed when he saw all the dishes come in at once. When I returned back towards the front desk, I saw a woman screaming at the owner asking for the manager. He looks up at me and calls me over, and he introduces me as the manager. She then lets out the Banshee inside her and tells me that this man is incompetent at his job and wants me to fire him and give her a free meal as well as gift coupons. Entitled much, and I tell her that I'll go talk to the owner and make sure that our host is scolded. I bring my boss with me to the office and we just start laughing our butts off and then walk back out and tell her, "Here's the owner. Do you have anything you would like to discuss with him?" I said to the lady. Her face went bright red and it turns out she wanted to sit her and her 2 kids at the only available 10-top table, and we had a family of 12 coming in for it. The look on her face was priceless when she realized she had been screaming at the owner. Boss and me still laugh about this to this day and share drinks after hours cackling about how silly she acted. It was a great night and I still work at this pub to this day and I'm content with the restaurant bustle. And the next one is another malicious compliance story which is titled, "Yes, I will tell your child why she is not getting Christmas." So for context, I used to work at a TV provider many years ago and Christmas time was the worst because customers would call in complaining that they cannot pay their TV bill because of course, it is taking Christmas away from my child. And how could I be such a mean and uncaring evil person? Well, the thing is, when every third call is like this, I just stopped caring. 2 days after Halloween, one of these parents call in on a late December day, wanting to know why they not only had to pay their $145 bill this Christmas season, but why we expected them to pay for the 7 pay-per-view adult movies as well, all of them starting at $14. The upset mom is yelling at me when I hear this, "Lisa, you get over here." You, referring to myself, "I want you to tell my daughter why she's not getting a damn Christmas this year. Go and tell her." So I get this girl on the phone who sighs as Mother Dearest walks into the other room. "Hey, let me guess, you want to tell me something?" Me, "Yeah, I hate to tell you this, but your mom has overspent herself and you probably are not gonna get anything for Christmas." Child, "Yeah, mom hardly ever pays the bills. Sorry, you're not the first person she has put me on the phone with this year, but you're like the first one who has not BS'd me, so thank you." Me, "Well, Lisa, just don't let these things define who you become in life. The only one who can stop you is yourself, not me or even your mom." Child, "Thanks. Mom is coming back. Don't worry. I get Christmas with my neighbors. I'm good." Mother, "So now you're gonna cancel my bill?" Apparently she had been getting her service credited using this tactic, and I say, Nope, you still owe us a minimum of $150 before we can reinstate your account. Mother, you're heartless, taking Christmas away from my little angel. And then she slammed the phone down. And the user in the comments said, I was definitely expecting OP to stop naming all of the adult movies titles to the kid. Still a pretty good ending though. And yeah guys, thank you for watching. I will see you again tomorrow.